There is a story about an anthropologist who was studying a tribe in Africa, and he did a little experiment while he was there. He gathered all the children of the village together, and he took a bunch of treats, and he put the treats on top of a stump that was there in the village. And then he asked the kids to stand about 100 feet away, and he said, okay, now, I'm going to say go, and you all run to the stump, and whoever gets there first gets all the treats. And so he shouted, run, and all the kids spontaneously grabbed each other's hands and ran to the stump and arrived there together at the same time. And he was shocked by this. As a Westerner, it's like, get what you can get and get it now. So he was shocked by this response of the kids, and he said to them, why did you all decide to grab hands like that and run to the tree together? And one of the little boys said, how could I be happy if all my friends are sad? It's really a beautiful response. And I think in some ways it is a summary of the gospel that we hear in today's Mass. How could I be happy if my brothers and sisters are sad? If others do not have enough, when I have an abundance, how could that possibly give me joy? Today, in the Scripture, Jesus says to us, avoid greed of all types. Avoid greed. Give generously to those who have less when you have more. My brothers and sisters, even a cursory and quick reading of the New Testament will remind us that the virtue of poverty is in fact a virtue that is essential for every Christian. We cannot dispense ourselves of the need to live some form of poverty. That when we see someone in need, we are required as Christians to give when we have more. It's not optional. It is an essential part of our Christian life to not live a life of greed. In the parable that Jesus gives us, he manifests for us by this life of this man in the parable that he shares the results of a life of greed. What happens when we live greedy, when we have the desire to just obtain more of whatever it is, power, possessions, goods, wealth, fame, whatever. When we live our life with the desire to pursue more, when we live greed, we see what happens to a person, how really they shrivel up and end up becoming nothing. But if you look at this parable, it's very interesting. Jesus begins the parable by saying, there was a rich man. Think about that. This guy is already rich. Even before he gets this abundant harvest, he's already rich. He already has more than he needs. And then he has this bumper crop, amazing harvest. He's going to tear down his barns and build larger ones to store more stuff which he'll never be able to use anyway. See what happens when we live greed? This guy already had enough, but for him it wasn't enough. When we are greedy, no matter how much we have, we want more. Why? Because if we place our hope in the things of this world, trying to fill our hearts with this material realm, our hearts will always still remain empty. Because this world and nothing in it can really fill the hope that we have in our hearts for goodness. There's really only one who is in the world but not of the world who can fill our hearts. And that is Jesus Christ. If we try and fill that space within us, we'll want more and more and more and more, and no matter how much we have, we will still be empty. It is only when we set our hearts on God that space within us can be filled. Greed, then, is a bottomless pit in which we throw ourselves and never reach the end of sorrow. But that's really not all that happens to a person who lives a life of greed. We hear the inner dialogue of this man as he's speaking, and he says, as for you, you have riches stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry. And in these words, we see the effect of greed on this man's life. In essence, he's saying, be lazy, become a glutton and a drunkard. Give yourself over to all of the passions of your flesh. Throw yourself into the sins of this world. That's the fruit of a life of greed, laziness, drunkenness, sorrow, sadness, the passions of this world, which will only in the end leave us more empty and desolate. And so what's the answer? The answer, my brothers and sisters, is to learn to live the virtue of poverty. We are all called to live that virtue, although the expression of poverty will be different for every person in this church. The manner of living poverty that the missionaries of charity live, the sisters of Mother Teresa, will be very different than the manner in which we live poverty, or the person with 5 kids will live poverty compared to the single person who lives poverty. I can't tell you for your specific case how you should live poverty, but it must be lived by all of us. In order for you to consider how the virtue of poverty should be expressed in your life, I would simply give you 2 pieces of advice. 1, to share with those who are in need. If you see and know of someone who has a greater need and you have surplus, then give. Look for opportunities to share with the less fortunate. In whatever life you live, that should be a guiding principle. To give to those who are in need, including to the church and to charitable organizations. That's the first principle. The second principle for a life of poverty is to realize, first and foremost, our spiritual poverty. And that is to say that in our spiritual lives, we are in fact beggars. We are the poor. Because we know fully that without God in our lives, we are nothing. We need God. We thirst for Him. We hunger for Him. And without Him, we have nothing. We truly must realize the poverty of our spirit and live in such a way that we long for God and know that He alone, in His love and mercy, can fill the emptiness that we experience as humans. Our poverty is to give to those who are in need and to realize that we are poor before Christ because He alone is the source of our wealth. My brothers and sisters, as we gather today to celebrate this Holy Mass, we pray that the Lord may inspire us a real and a true form of poverty, that we may be open to giving to others and open to receiving from the Lord.
Amen.
Amen.